Hey everybody, welcome to the Art Lounge Alley. That was really moving, right? I think that video really captured something that I think art really does, which is kind of snap you out of this stupor, this systemic stupor that we find ourselves currently, I think, internationally. And I think it just kind of snaps you out of it and puts you into the moment, kind of into reality, in a sense. And I think that video, her playing, her singing, really did that. I think it really it really brings that out. And I hope it moved you guys as much as it moved me. It was a bit of a last minute thing, you know. I saw it and I figured, you know, this is going to be something great to share with all you guys. So I'm glad I was able to actually do it in time for this next stream, which is going to be a continuation of figure drawing basics. If you guys want to find more of her work, that was a Marianne BL. And it's actually done based off of an original, and you guys could see at the beginning. Once the stream ends, you guys can watch it again, and you guys will see the artist. And I'll also post the link to the video so you guys can check out more of our work, more of the original artist's work. Yeah. All right, so just getting back into what I was doing yesterday, which was showing you guys the step-by-step process of developing a drawing. So starting out with something a little bit more basic, a little bit more simplified, which is right here, using basic shapes. It's something that I started out for this hand example, as well as this one and other ones going forward. I'm going to be showing you guys more examples today. Actually, I'm going to continue working on this hand right here, but just to quickly go over what I was talking about yesterday, it's great to start off with a general sketch to make sure that everything is in its proper proportion and placed in the right spot. So, you know, if you're working, let's say, within a frame, if you're working on a panel, let's say, or if you're working on a page and you want to make sure that it's centered, it's best to start out with a quick sketch, you know, using just general shapes, nothing too detailed, nothing too defined, just a placeholder in order for you to be able to work on it more in detail, knowing that things are where they're supposed to be proportionally, anatomically, that sort of thing. So quick sketches do for that, and you could do that by just doing general shapes, just using big shapes, areas where you see that take up a lot of space. For instance, the wrist, that could be just a cylinder shape. This shape right here is another big shape, and then just using the cylinder shape in its thinnest form for other parts of the finger. But I'll show you guys in a new example today as well. Then going forward, you want to construct the planes, you know, areas that you see forming the object, whether it's a face, whether it's a hand, whatever. They're different planes for dimensions, basically, to create dimensions. So broader planes, as you see here, would be the front of the face, the side of the face. Those are the broader, big planes. And then you got your more fine planes, which is, let's say, the bridge of the nose right here. Then the sides of the nose, that's another plane form. This area right here by the lips, that's another plane form. You know, so just anything that kind of starts to take curvature, here, all those would be considered planes. To get you guys more familiar with the terms, to get a visual understanding of what that term means, I figured it's best to show it to you guys this way. So you could do that for pretty much anything. You could do that for the face, you could do that for the hand. I'll show you guys, for those of you who are tuning in for the very first time, something related to the head and how this block form basically is used, and planes are used for even parts of the face. So as you can see here, this is kind of an example that also is used for buildings as well. But you could see how the front of the building is basically the front of the face, and the side of the building would be the second plane. The front plane, this is the second plane right here, third, fourth, etc. And in this drawing, you could see how it's also broken down into planes. So this would be the smaller planes, which would be the forehead, as I mentioned, the bridge of the nose, and this section right here, the side of the nose as well. That's, you know, I could add that into the drawing as well to give you guys a better idea. That's also a plane. This area right here is also a plane. So just to get you guys more familiar with that terminology, with a better visual understanding, I think it's great to draw this out, to try to draw it out in your own sketchbook as well, to not only visually understand it, but also with your hand and your eye. You know, just having that constructed ingrains it better, and you get a better understanding of it as well. You know, we do tend to use our sensory, all of our different senses to understand something. You know, we understand it with touch, we understand it through smell, we understand it visually, you know, hearing, if it's something to do with music as well. All those things give us a better understanding of whatever it is that we're trying to focus on, or whatever it is that we're trying to understand. So if you do it just visually, you could also enhance it physically by touching or drawing those parts out. So it's really important to establish that in your sketchbook as well. So that's pretty much it for when it comes to the head. And you guys could see how the planes can be formed, even parts of the hair as well, to show dimension. That it's not just flat, you know, that there are certain parts that start to protrude more to give it more volume, to give it more shape. So yeah, just going back to the hands, which is going to be the main focus for the rest of the week, I'm going to say. If not two, really. So just going back to this, started out with a simple sketch, then we started to construct the block forms, the planes, as you can see here as well. Now just to quickly go over certain details that are important, as you can see the way it's drawn here, it's not parallel, they're not exactly the same. This section right here is thicker than this section here. And as you can see that in a drawing, it's gradually getting thicker as it comes down to the wrist. There's more muscle in this section right here. And then as you can see with the fingers, there's also planes on the fingers as well. And that could be very useful when you come to a point of having to shadow things. So depending on the light source is from the top down, you might be creating shadows on the side. So it kind of helps visually for you to picture how the light would fall on the hand and where the light wouldn't actually reach as much. So yeah, so same example here, started out with simple basic shapes to make sure everything fits within the section, and then started defining them more by sectioning out the planes more, side of the hand. So now we're up to the next stage, which is this stage right here, where I'm going to continue on with the same method, basically first starting to build the planes on here so you guys can see the full step. And it's not a big deal if certain things seem a little bit off in comparison to, let's say, the reference that you're working from, because you could always move that. And that's the whole idea of sketching lightly in the beginning. Like here you guys are seeing it, it's a little bit more defined. I'm pressing harder on it so it's visually available to you guys so you could really see what's going on. But if you're doing it at your own time, you want to do this entire process, all these stages, as lightly as possible up until the point of the last stage, where you can actually start really defining things, fixing things, basically beautifying, I want to say, the image. In that stage, it's a little bit, you're a little bit more at ease to like really start defining features. You know everything is where it's supposed to be, and for the most part, it's all structurally there. But in the beginning, you want to make sure that it's light, so if you do need to move things around, if you make a mistake, or if, let's say, you want to shift something a little bit more to the left, right, up or down, or whatever, it's still possible for you to do that. It's not going to be a hassle. You're not going to have to really like destroy the paper to get rid of that mistake, as you would if you were to press really hard. So on the side of the hand right here, that's going to be another plane to give the hand more volume, more dimension, and continuing on into the fingers as well. And it looks very technical right now, but you guys will see it progress into more realistic drawing. I used to look at that when I was younger, and I used to think, well, that's not really drawing. You know, it's such a stiff process. This is very mathematical, almost very calculated. And at the time when I was younger, I would picture like the artistic sort of expression to be very chaotic almost, and you're just like drawing everywhere. But you can get to that stage once you get a better understanding. You know, once you have it internalized, once you understand the proportions of whatever it is that you're drawing, whether it's the figure or certain parts of the figure, once you internalize that, you're able to really just start from wherever, start however, and build it out to be exactly how you've constructed it through all the times of practice, through all the times of drawing things out, even if they have to be technical, how you constructed it in your memory. And that's something that happens with a lot of artists, a lot of illustrators. It's not absolutely necessary. Some people really could grasp the stuff without it, you know, and they're really able to construct a figure. But I think the biggest benefit of doing it this way is that it then allows you, once you understand it three-dimensionally, once you understand it in all these forms, which is the purpose of the block forms, is to really be able to understand its construction fully. You're able to maneuver it however you like. You could draw it in any sort of direction because you understood the foundation of everything within that drawing, within the subject. You know, so whether it be a car, a building, or a hand, or a face, because you really got all the different parts to it, it's not as much of a challenge for you anymore. It's not just about lines and getting down the lines. It's really just constructing out the subject the way you want it. So there are multiple benefits to it. And it really does save time. You know, I think this method is really good for all sorts. You know, there's different ways that people learn. Everybody learns differently. Everybody picks up at a different pace and different time, which isn't important. You know, that isn't something that's necessary for becoming really good at drawing, at really becoming really good at pretty much any artistic field, I want to say, because it's really about being able to express yourself well with the medium that you're using. So if you get there 4 months later than somebody else, a year later, 2, 5, 10, whatever, that's not important. The goal was originally to get to a point where you can. And that's something I think that's important to remember throughout your journey of becoming better. You know, if it takes you 5 years, it takes you 5 years, because essentially you really wanted to get really good at painting, let's say, or really good at playing an instrument. So this is why I always advocate that competition does not belong in the art field. You shouldn't be looking at somebody else and saying, well, they learned or they're good at. It doesn't matter, you know, because once again, this is something that I've used as an example. Todd McFarlane is great at drawing. Jim Lee is great at drawing. Kim Jong-ji was great at drawing. They're all great. There isn't a better, worse, or, you know, that fascist garbage of like superior, inferior. It's none of that, because they all had their own style. They all had their own subjects. They all had their own interests. And it's not a competition. It's just being able to express yourself and create content and create interesting things from your imagination. So it really, you know, it really doesn't belong. It absolutely doesn't. And for anybody that does, they're missing. Anybody that practices that, they're totally out of the artistic realm. They're more on the capitalist side of things, because that's really where it's exercised the most. Whether it belongs or not, it's a totally different subject. But in the artistic field, it absolutely does not belong. You should not be competing with anybody other than yourself. You know, getting to a place where you're really you're really good. That's all that's really important. So just keep practicing. Just keep pushing yourself. If you have to just do it, if the only amount of time you have per day is like 30 minutes, that's still great. As long as you're still on the train of of learning art or being artistically active, it's always beneficial, So it's better than, if every day you're taking 30 minutes to draw, you're still in the mode of creativity. You're still thinking about art. You're still thinking about drawing. You're still processing whatever it is that you learned from the previous day and reaffirming it in your memory the next day, if it only takes 30 minutes for you to do it, or if it's the only amount of time that you have, as opposed to you draw for 30 minutes one day, then a week later you draw for 30 minutes again. It's still better. I still encourage you guys to do it, but the best way to go about it is to continuously do it every day. Just half an hour is already enough, and eventually you're gonna want to make time for it. You're gonna start seeing results, or you're gonna feel motivated or inspired by something, or inspired by yesterday's progress, and you'll want to make more time for it. And before you know it, you're not even paying attention to time. So just stay in a rhythm of it. Forget about time, how long it takes you. Forget about the stupid idea of people saying you got to be talented. It's a process. It's a learning process. It's frustrating as well. Just think back to anything else, like when you were first learning to read. Even further back, let's talk about the first time you learned to tie your shoe as a kid. That was frustrating because you still couldn't really grasp what the process was like, right? You couldn't remember it as well. Your memory isn't as well developed. Your hand-eye coordination isn't as well developed. Your muscle flexibility isn't as well as developed. So all that kind of builds up that frustration. But eventually you got to a point where you could just easily do it, right? You don't think about it now. You didn't have to think about it after like a couple of weeks of practicing or something. Same thing with reading. You started out and it was difficult and it's frustrating. In fact, a lot of people who are older still read at people that I've met who are like 25 or 20 in their 20s, they were reading at like a 10th grade level where they just haven't practiced. And I'm sure a lot of it had to do with the frustration of the learning process, of recognizing that, they can't focus, and not pushing themselves to focus more and really process things. Like they kind of gave up on it and just never really improved on it. But a lot of people, when they first started out reading, it was a painstaking process. You had to sit there and you had to diligently remind yourself the alphabet, remind yourself definitions, writing out words and spelling them and all that kind of stuff. And now it's not that much of a process, right? You just sit and you read, and you don't have to open up the dictionary to read a lot of words. You understand them. So it's the same exact process with drawing. You're gonna feel that same frustration in the beginning, and you have to just remember and stay motivated and think to yourself, I'm getting a stage closer to becoming better and better each and every day. And that's how you continuously perpetually stay in a motivated state. You have to look at your accomplishments, as small as they are, and you have to remove competition and comparison. It's not about that. So hopefully all those things can help you guys stay inspired. If you do have any questions, or if you have any sort of thoughts and doubts or process that you go through mentally as you're learning, bring it up in chat, or send me a message. We can talk about it. I could either mention you or talk about it more broadly to help other people who might share the same sort of thoughts and doubts or frustrations or whatever it is. and just give you guys some perspective on how to overcome it. How to improve your mental game as well. It is a thought process when it comes to drawing. It's not just this like pick up a brush pen and instantly you got beautiful work on paper. You really do have to think about what you're doing. So sometimes that becomes a little bit overbearing, right? Or too much. But yeah, post those questions. I'd be happy to talk about them. I'd be happy to figure it out with you. It's really what this is all about. So in this stage, after, as you guys noticed, we're pretty much in the same stage here. So now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be defining features more, making them look more natural, connecting joints, erasing certain parts that aren't really necessary as much, as I start to give lines more character. Lines for the fingers, they're not as straight. Adding curves where it's necessary. And that's something that you guys pick up better as you draw hands more. You start to see reasons why. There's a reason for most of the lines, why it tends to like curve a little bit more as it gets towards the nail. That it because the nail is there, the skin kind of wraps inwards. It doesn't go over the nail, so that forms a bit of a bubble at the very tip where the nail is. I don't know if you guys can really notice it, but little details like that make a huge difference. They really could bring more life to the drawing, more character to the hand. Paying attention to these little wrinkles that form on the fingers. It's just like excess skin that allows you to bend your fingers that way. That's what the purpose of those are there. So once you start paying attention to the things, it's like this marvelous sort of realization where it's like everything has its purpose there. Not really thinking of it. I was like, oh, it just looks like that. And that's really where the process lies, enjoying the process, because it's like discovery. You discover all sorts of things, and you start to find like beautiful things in all sorts of subjects or whatever it is that you're drawing. That's where the joy lies. A lot of people tend to focus in their imagination on the results and how beautiful it's going to look, or throughout the process they're like, oh, is this going to look good? You kind of want to stay away from that. You really want to be present in the drawing itself, in finding these really beautiful lines, and just kind of seeing how it suddenly starts to breathe life into your drawing. I think that's really what the joy is. If you guys were present in the previous stream yesterday when I started my new project, that's kind of what was going on. There's a point where I just start to really focus in on like tiny little things, but it's really cool to see how those tiny little things start to collectively make something look more and more realistic or bring more and more emotion. You know, let's say if we're talking about face expression, just noticing something small and then drawing it and then instantly seeing how it transforms the image, the feeling. That's really where the joy lies. At least for me. You know, I think maybe there are artists who could share what their moments of joy is in the process. It could be somewhere else, you know, it could be something else, something more and more specific. Which again brings the idea that every artist has something very unique to offer, some interesting perspective, you know, whether it's from life or whether it's within the art itself or whatever else, you know. That sense of focus, that sense of attention to detail brings out the wonder, you know, the sense of wonder. So I'm just giving more and more definition. I'm going to start erasing some things here because, as I mentioned, they might seem a little bit boxy because I have to press hard for you guys to see it. I have to remind myself to kind of snap out of the mode of like pressing hard, as you saw when I was like defining the fingers, and take it back to more of a light sensation when it comes to holding the pencil. And just being conscious of that, I think also makes the experience more interesting. In fact, you could feel the difference of how you start approaching parts of the drawing once you switch out of like certain modes. Like, so if you're in a very meticulous mode and then switching out of it and doing a little bit more broad work all over the drawing, or if you were like, you know, shading and you started pressing really hard, to switch out of that and go into more of like a relaxed, free-flowing form, you start to recognize that experience and how that sort of affects your, I'm going to say affect your mood when you're drawing. Not that it's a bad mood, it's just different. It's not a bad or a good, it's just like a different sensation. But I think having that in the forefront always is really important, to eventually have it just be like natural for you to be able to switch in between those states. But the most important one is drawing lightly. I think pressing hard is just like sometimes a result of wanting more control over your lines, or darker lines. So that is an easy state to jump into. At some point, your drawing requires that. So I'm just adding shadows into all the divisions on the fingers to give the drawing more life. So as you guys could see, it's very similar stage. I did skip one stage, which is this stage right here, and I just immediately went from this stage to this. But that was the stage prior to this one. Well, prior to this one was just, as you guys could see, adding more curves, connecting things. And you kind of saw it in this process where I started to add these little details for the knuckles, rounding off corners, the really sharp corners that were created from the sketch even prior to it. So, and then on top of that, it just became about like beautifying the image. So I'm going to say that pretty much does it for that hand example. I'm going to start. I'm going to start another one. And see how far I can go before I have to get ready for the next stream, which is going to be coloring comics. Actually really glad I was able to show you guys that special intro, but that wasn't the intro that I was talking about the day before. This was just kind of, as I mentioned, it was like last minute sort of thing. The special intro that I'm talking about is going to be next week, and it's also going to be a concert. It's going to be longer, you know, this is just one song, but the next stream is going to be, the next special stream is going to be longer. It's going to be a performance. It's going to be a band. Pretty excited about that too. Different mood, different feel. Also great artist as well. But this Friday, there's going to be another special stream, and that's something that you guys have already been seeing, which is a continuation of Gil Elvgren and his influences. I'm going to be continuing on talking about Norman Rockwell, one of my favorite artists. Beautiful work, amazing skill. It's absolutely fascinating looking at how he builds the body and how he paints all the features and the amount of color that goes into his illustrations, and the attention to detail on all sorts of things. I can't wait. And that's going to be Friday. It's going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's going to be different than today. I'm mixing it up for you guys. I mean, when you least expect it, there's a special stream. And I think that just makes things more fun. Occasionally, you guys will be surprised like this. So, just know there's a lot more content to come. So again, just like this stage right here, well, here, I'm just using basic shapes as you saw. He's starting out with like a cylinder shape to a circle for the palm, and then using these like, I want to say like French fries kind of, to create the fingers. And notice not a lot of details, very light sketching. To once again establish the parameters, make sure everything's proportionate, that things are just as wide as they're supposed to be, just as long as they're supposed to be. And something I talk about very frequently is not going into detail at the beginning. You start out lightly sketching the finger, and before you know it, you start putting in the muscles and shading. You want to avoid doing that, because once you get to another part and you start doing that, then another, and then you kind of zoom out and look at the drawing and you're like, wait, it's too big, the palm is too wide, or it's too long in comparison to the fingers, or the fingers are too long. And now you've already put in the detail, you've shaded things, you spent all this time and it looks wonky, and I see that happen very frequently, actually, with even in intermediate drawings, like people who have a good eye for let's say the figure or certain parts, but they spend all the time on creating details, and then something is off, but you could see that they ended up working through it instead of erasing it. Like they just started adding detail around it, or hiding it or something, like your most common one, which is hiding the hand behind the back. So it looks really awkward, while everything else is like very well rendered. Or they will render it out to a point where it looks hyper realistic, but its placement in relationship to everything else in the drawing is off. So they're just kind of trying to compensate for that error and hoping that the eye won't notice. But pretty much most people who aren't even artists can pick up on that stuff. We just have this built-in sensor to recognize when something is kind of off. It's like our instinct, starts to kick in, and we just see it. Some people won't be able to pinpoint it. They'll just not be as appealed to the drawing, or they'll just kind of look at it real quick and move on. So I think it's important to know that if you see it, other people will see it, and try to work on it as much as possible. And it kind of motivates you to put effort into whatever it is that you're drawing. Don't try to take shortcuts, and don't fool yourself and say like, oh, it's not a big deal. No one's going to see that the leg is extremely thick in comparison to the other one, or the pose is kind of awkward. They'll notice. So do your best and don't rush to the finish line. Try to learn and get better at it. So if it's coming out awkward, figure out why. What's wrong? Notice the detail that fixes it, so that next time it comes around, you don't make the same mistake, or you don't try to avoid it because you're just like, oh, last time it came out wonky, but I don't know what's wrong, so I'd rather just not do it. I'd rather hide the arm behind the back, or not draw the feet, draw the drawing so big that the feet are cut out, and just never, it's like sweeping a problem under the rug, literally. You're not you're not addressing it. You're just like cutting it out. So this is the first stage, very basic shapes. Now I'm gonna do that same stage again. You guys are gonna see me do it here. And again, this shows how useful it is, because it's a limited amount of space. I want to make sure that the drawing fits. So just using these big shapes, lightly. And then once you do those basic shapes, you can kind of go back and redefine them a little bit more. I'm kind of taking a break to go from one stage to the next, but ideally when you're doing this, you're just continuously flowing through things. So once you establish the general shape, you could go back and start working on the next stage. Not really taking any sort of break from it, and start defining the curvature, let's say, to the fingers more. For those of you who are just tuning in, you did miss the special intro, but as I mentioned before, I'm going to be at the end of the stream, or at the end of today's session. You guys will be able to rewatch it. I'm going to upload that. I'm going to leave the link in the description for you guys to check out the video, check out the artist, as well as information about the original artist. And that's going to be available for you. Okay, so same stage, same sort of results, and now I'm going to start the next stage, which is creating the block forms for it, so that later they become useful when it comes to shading. So here I'm starting to press a little bit harder to distinguish the lines. You know, since I'm slowly making some adjustments, slowly making some corrections, I want my eye to be able to recognize the lines that I'm going to work with, and I'm going to continue working with, while the ones that I don't want are in the background. Once again, highlighting the importance of drawing lightly. So visually, it doesn't become so confusing. If all your lines are really dark, or you've pressed on them really hard, it becomes more and more confusing as you go through the stages of developing your drawing. Something else that I actually wanted to quickly go over, it's a reminder, for what the hand looks like when you're constructing it. Let me find that ruler. Okay, let me just use this one instead for now. Oh, there it is. The fingers aren't as long as the palm. They're not supposed to be longer than the palm. And I suggest you guys do that with your own hand. Just measure it. We'll measure the longest finger on your hand and use that to see how long it is in comparison to the palm. And as you can see, it doesn't go all the way down to where the wrist is, which would be pretty much the size of the palm. It goes about an inch further back from the wrist. So I'm going to say like an inch and a half, maybe inch and a quarter. It goes a little bit further back. So from the base, basically, base of the finger down. For me, this is what the case is. So your fingers shouldn't be extremely long. Your palm shouldn't be extremely short either. So just a little side note there to remember when you're drawing hands. And don't shy away from erasing. Especially if you're just starting out, it's important to do it so that you kind of learn where your mistakes are. If you're not paying attention and you're just going with it, you might be missing some important info. And it's your sketchbook. You should be comfortable in your sketchbook. You shouldn't have to feel like, this is going to be the masterpiece that everybody's going to recognize me for. It should just be about making mistakes, learning, making things look ugly, and being okay with it, because that's going to happen. That's going to happen throughout your process of getting better. Oop. Pressed a little too hard there. Whoa, guys. I'm kind of going over the time limit here. I'm going to take a quick 5-minute break, and I'm going to be back for coloring comics, which is going to be me working on John Buscema's Conan the Barbarian. This is the comic right here. So I'm going to be continuing on working on this comic on the panels that I drew in the sketchbook. Or is it the other sketchbook? Uh-oh. Careful there. Yeah, it's going to be here. I still have some panels to finish up before I completely abandon this book. So let's see, we're left off here. Huh, am I done? Maybe I'm done with these pages. So yeah, I'm going to continue on with this. So check back in, guys. I'll be back in 5 minutes. If you guys enjoy this content, make sure you remember to hit the like and subscribe button. They're both greatly appreciated. And I'll see you guys in the next stream. Hello viewers, artists, and all in between, to another stream of the Our Lounge Alley. I'm your host, and this is going to be coloring comics. I'm going to be using India inks to color beautiful work done by John Buscema. It's a study, it's me visually reading his work, getting involved in the story, getting involved in the characters, bringing them to life, bringing his beautiful work to life once again. Yeah, so that's going to be going on for the rest of the stream, for the rest of the night. And I am currently, this is the progress of drawing comics. I'm going to have to go back a couple of pages, and you guys can get a better idea of why things are going in the direction that they're going in drawing comics. So this is just a recap. Conan is out to find a cult leader. He has a bone to pick with him, so he figured out how to infiltrate the meeting, disguised himself as one of the members here, and this is actually a panel that I have to revisit and redraw. He presents the guards with the secret emblem, I guess, to get in, and he listens in on what's going on. And that right there is the cult leader. So this is where we're going to continue. I have this little jar. It's acquiring some paint at the bottom, which looks kind of gross. But I assure you it is paint. And for those of you who are new, I'm actually going to be really taking it back to like traditional stuff, because originally I was inking things using this brush pen that I'm going to show you guys. Now it's really important for those of you who are doing it as well to get a jar with a lid, because if you got pets, oh man, all your comics, all your work and other stuff is going to get wet. You know, they knock it down, or if one day you're just a little clumsy and you elbow it and then it spills all over your work or your references, your comics, all that stuff, it's going to be a disaster. So make sure you get yourself a jar with lid for cleaning out your brush. So yeah, this was the thing that I was using. Now this is great if you are, let's say if you're doing like a visual demonstration. Let's say you're not at your desk, you know, you're just drawing somewhere. This is good for that because the ink is in there. You don't have to dip it into anything. You don't have to hold anything to dip into, but it dries out. Refilling it is a bit of a hassle. It's not very clear as how to go about it. There are better brush pens out there that make it easier for you to refill, but I found this one to be kind of tedious. Like, you have to open it up, really clean it. You know, you really have to do some thorough work because it dries up. You know, and I'm using India ink to refill it. I'm using this stuff right here. Oh, this is like the old one. But yeah, this is Bombay Black India ink. I'm using this stuff, and it dries out, which is great. It really does play an important role in the process, because if you, let's say, make a mistake, it dries out quickly, and you could white it out quickly. So there's definitely a benefit to it. But the downside is if you're using something like this, it dries inside, and it kind of clogs up the area where the ink flows down to the bristles. So that's it's a pain in the ass to do it. So I'm really trying to revert back to just how they used to do it traditionally. You know, I recently saw, this is something I talked about before, I saw John Buscema doing the full drawing from sketch all the way to inking, and he was just using a brush, you know, just a simple brush, and he was dipping it in black ink, and he was able to get like even the most finest details, like these fine lines. He was able to just quickly, I didn't even take time. Like, that's how well he wielded his tools. So I'm challenging myself to get to that place, to get to a place where I'm very comfortable using these tools. And it's something so simple. You just dip it into the ink and then you can wash this brush. So anyways, with that said, I'm going to start filling in these files. Yeah, I gotta tell you, it's such a joy to be able to unplug, to not look at the screen. As much as I still do enjoy digital, and I plan to actually improve my digital situation, there's a part of me that wants to and doesn't, because using the Wacom tablet, it's something I mentioned before. The one that I have, it doesn't have a screen on it. So you're staring at the screen and you're not able to see the brush strokes that you're making. You could see them on the screen, but because there is that disconnect between your hand motion and what you see on the screen, it's just this kind of like intuitive process where you're really depending on your hand-eye coordination in a different way. You know, your brain is telling your hand to draw a line that you want a certain way, but you're not able to look at your hand to do it. Whereas if you're doing it traditionally, if you're just doing it like this, that there's like an immediate connection. So that bit of disconnection, that little bit of, I'm going to say lag, right? That's a more technical term, can be a bit frustrating. But I think now that I've been really getting back into it and I've been doing it more and more, I'm getting more comfortable with it, and I think it also improves your hand-eye coordination. It improves your relationship between, you know, your mind basically and your hand, because once again, you're not really looking at it, but your hand has to listen to what your mind is telling it to do. So that visual aid in some way can be hindering, but in other ways it could actually really improve your work. So I'm like, do I really need it? You know, do I really need to get a one with the screen on it? Part of me does, part of me doesn't. I'm still debating on it. I think at some point I'm going to cave in and get it, just so that I could focus more on drawing and just get good at it that way. You know, I think I'm going to focus less on time. You know, focus less on like, oh, I need to make this right brush stroke, and then deleting it and then doing it again, like you guys might have seen me do. But it's probably going to be sometime in the future. It's not anytime soon. The goal is to just completely do things traditionally, to get really, really fast and really good at traditional work, so that when I upload the image, it's going to be just to make it look good. And that's pretty much it. To like put in the final touches, basically. Oh damn, I forgot. I need green. I'm definitely going to need lots of green. It's funny, now that I'm looking at the green here, I could see where the appeal came for my project that I recently completed. If you guys haven't seen it, you guys can go back to previous episodes by going to the video section and Twitch channel and filtering it based on collection, which opens up folders for you, and you can go back and view previous streams through there. But in that stream, in the previous project stream, I show you guys the final piece. I finished it up over the weekend. And the sky, I noticed, has a very similar color scheme as the walls here. It's like that kind of green yellow. Oh, this is really green. Yeah, when it comes to India ink, it's very potent. Like, the colors are so potent that you have to be very careful when dipping your brush in there. How does that look? Too green. Way too green. Way too green. See, it's kind of closer, but still. No dice. Maybe add a little bit of brown and see what that does. Yeah, surprisingly, that kind of gets closer. Now you guys are going to see the amazing part about India inks. So I don't like these colors, the ones that I started out with. And you guys are going to witness what the major benefit of working with India inks is in just a few minutes. Now, to be honest, I don't really mind the color variation that happens from all this mixing. I think it adds more character to the panel. But that's not the goal here. The goal is to draw it exactly as I see it. Now, that's something I could do with my personal projects. Things that I'm working on from my imagination. It's always fun to play around with colors there. And this is a really good example. You know, this is what I was talking about when it came to like oil painting and really admiring oil painters. How quick they get at mixing colors. They could just look at a color that they need and instantly be able to mix the right colors to get it. I mean, also, I'm taking on that sort of approach as opposed to just like pre-mixing. You know, if you guys go back to the very first episode of Coloring Comics, you guys will get a better idea of how they used to do it back in the day, where the colorists would basically pre-mix the vials and they would send like a formula basically to the mass production studio, where like people who manually would sit down and like color the comic books, they would have like an idea of like how to mix the colors quickly, so that way they don't spend too much time figuring it out. So like, for example, in order to get like this green, they would say like 25% white, 25% brown, 40% yellow, and there will be very technical terms. You guys can check that out. That's also available by going to the video section in Twitch, filtering it on collection, and you will see folders. You will see a folder for coloring comics. You'll see a folder for special streams, where it's available in both, actually. So yeah, and there you guys will see a more in-depth and more accurate description of like what that process was. But basically they would send in these codes, and people would sit down and they would mix the vials. Like they would have like empty vials, and they would just follow the description. They'll add 25, like 2 drops, and it'll be very specific too. Like 25% would be 2 drops or 3 drops or whatever. I don't remember the exact number. And then they would shake it up, and they would just have this color. They could just dip into it and start coloring. And I think what I'm doing right now, well, what I am doing right now, is developing an eye for these colors, so that I can actually just know, okay, it's exactly this amount to get this, and just mix it quickly. Alright, so what I was talking about before, this is the benefit of working with India inks. They dry so quickly, and they add like this protective layer, so you could just cover it up. Like, you remember how green that was, and look at that. In just a few minutes I was able to just cover it up completely. I don't have to go back over and over and over again to cover it. It's that dry in such a short period of time. Whereas if you guys have been present throughout all the coloring comics streams, you can remember back to when I was working with watercolor, and how delicate that stage was. Like, I had to really, I mean, benefit was that I had to learn quickly. Like, I had to learn how to mix the color and remember them well, so that I don't keep going over the same area over and over again with water. What that does is it eventually wears out the paper. Nope. See? The other side, it's totally fine. Yeah, it would wear out the paper, and it would bleed through to the other side of the page. Whereas with India inks, since they dry out quickly, as I mentioned, it creates this protective layer, and I can actually go back and add more color or add more pigment to it, and it's totally fine. So it's more forgiving for sure because of that, which I didn't really think about. I thought, oh, fast drying, that means I can't play around with the colors as much. Now I realize it's really beneficial. It actually speeds up the process. Instead of like playing around and muddying up the color and hoping eventually to get the right color, I let it dry and I put the right color on immediately. Big perk. Alright, I'm gonna leave that alone for now. And as you guys could see, like, there's some line color variation. There's like some brown, there's some green mixed in. It's not just a solid color, which I really do enjoy. I like that texture sort of to it, and it works so well with what I'm coloring. You know, giving the bricks more age. Whereas if I had it already pre-mixed, you know, it would be a solid color, and I could just easily go to it. The downside is not much of a downside, because again, it still helps me to learn. They quickly dry out in the mixing section of my palette. So within a few minutes, that color that I mixed is already inaccessible. Like it dried. So I have to remix the colors. But as I mentioned, that helps me actually get better and better at achieving it. Nope, too green. Too green, and this is too white. This is more accurate. Kind of. Needs a little brown. Speaking of brown, I just saw in the news that Steve Jobs' brown like sandals, I want to say there's like a specific moccasins or something. I don't think it's moccasins. I think it's something else. But his sandals, used sandals, sold for $200,000. $200,000 for used sandals. Like, I wonder what people do with that. You know, this is coming, it's not coming from some, well, who knows, but, you know, like, what are they doing with those sandals? Like, are they putting it in a glass case, and then when people come over, they're like, yeah, these are Steve Jobs' sandals that he wore. I don't know. It's kind of funny. Would you be impressed by that? Like, if you came over somebody's house and they're like, yeah, I just spent $200,000 on these sandals, and it's like in a glass container, and it's like Steve Jobs's sandals. So like his sweaty feet were in there. I don't know, it's weird. Kind of reminds me of that time where Britney Spears' gum was sold for like a lot of money too, which, how do you even confirm that? Like, does it come with some sort of DNA test or something? And what do you do with that? You know, does that really impress the guests? And like, if it's not about the guests, then what is it about? Like, do you just sit there and look at the gum all day, or? That $200 and like take a trip somewhere, man. Get like some sort of like boat cruise or something. You need to chill out. $200,000 for sandals, used sandals. It sounds like a Craigslist thing. You know, this is something that you would hear or come across on Craigslist. Now, if it's like Jimi Hendrix's guitar, that's something else. You know, I think that's cool. It's an instrument and it has to do with like beautiful, soulful music. So that's a really cool investment. I'm most likely going to come back and redo these colors, I think. I mean, it's already, look at that, it's already dry and I could come back and redo it. Cool. Very cool. Should be utilizing this right here. This is like a bottle of water. Just squeeze it into a little palette section and clean up the brush, man. Oh no. Oh, totally forgot that it's still wet. But look at that, it's already dried on my skin. Cool stuff. Gonna clean up the brush. Which is probably why I'm getting such muddy colors. Not probably, it definitely is the reason why I'm getting muddy colors. Moving on to these cult leaders and their robes. Now, the colors are a little less potent because I still have some like water on the brush. And this is where the rag comes in. And I really try to clean it up. And that was the other thing with the brush pen that I was showing you guys earlier, is that even after I wash it, it just retains a lot of water. Even after I wash it and after I like squeeze it out as much as possible, it still retains a lot of water, and that it dilutes the colors and it also adds more water to the paper, which sucks. It damages the paper more. What you're seeing right now, that's pure pigment. It's not mixed with anything. It just mixed the colors together, white and purple basically. So it's fully potent. It has this like buttery sort of feel to it, which I like. This is what it's all about. When it comes to traditional mediums, you really start to get the feel for the medium itself that you're using. It's not just about colors and the lines. It becomes very much about like the liquid form, the brush, how it feels, the paper that you're using. It brings out this totally new reality to the experience. Whereas digital doesn't do that. Digital, the benefit of digital is that it just allows you to focus on the subject, whatever it is that you're doing. You have less things to think about as you're trying to develop it. So there's like plus and minus for everything. Positive and negative to everything. I am adding a little bit of water here, and that also is a different feel once there is this protective layer. The surface becomes a lot more slick since the India inks dry out, and it gives that like extra coat. So now like using water isn't as bad. It's not going directly on the paper, it's going on top of what you already did. And this is similar to gesso. This is something that I used to use when I was doing oil painting. I would just add this like extra protective layer on top of the canvas because it feels differently. If you're just drawing or painting rather straight on canvas, without any sort of like medium on top of it, it's like trying to draw on cloth. If you've ever tried to paint anything, let's say on like your hat or a jacket or anything like that, your book bag, you'll know what I'm talking about. But if you add gesso on top of it, it creates this smooth surface. It's a process because you have to add it. You have to make sure that you do it in a way where it's very smooth. You have to do a couple of layers. Some people don't do a couple of layers. They only do like one coat and that's it. And that actually helps also to preserve the luminosity of colors, because with oils, since it is oil, it absorbs into the canvas. So to prevent that, you just do this light coat and it gets absorbed into that instead of like actual material. And that has a different effect. It's a different effect visually, and it's also a different effect when it comes to you painting. So this is basically right now what you guys are witnessing me do. This is like the gesso period. For this guy, for the other guy. I'm gonna let it dry and then go over with a more accurate color. And I'll be honest, I'm kind of like anticipating getting back into like inking stuff, trying to use this brush instead. It's kind of like the stages that I go through when it comes to drawing, when it comes to painting. When it comes to drawing, there's like 3 stages. The beginning, which is like sketching out the idea, getting it together, getting the composition together, making sure it's accurate and that sort of thing. That's a stage of its own. Then the next stage is the inking stage, and then after that it's the coloring stage. So each time I finish with one stage and move on to the next, I start to miss the previous stage to it. And then the final stage where I'm like beautifying images, I'm like, oh, it was so cool to just like color the stuff, or it was so cool to just sketch out. Being in that sketching state, you know, that's a different feeling than just like zooming in and like coloring this section and that section and really taking your time with everything. So each of those stages have their fun moments. It's kind of cool to explore all that, and that's kind of the benefit, I think, of like comics. You know, you're going from panel to panel. Like, I'm working on this panel, and the next panel I get to do it again. You know, I get to go through all those stages again. Or the next page, I get to go through that stage all over again. It's not as final as when it comes to, like, let's say oil painting, where you're working on one piece, one canvas, and it could go on for like months, you know, depending on how far you want to take it. I was reading a little bit about catching up on like Lucian Freud, which he's like the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the psychologist. Lucian Freud is a painter. In case you guys missed it, I did a bit of a short introduction. It wasn't really meant to be a special stream or anything of that sort. He just kind of like popped up in conversation about art. But you guys can check that out also. That's also in the previous streams, and the cover for the stream where he's there in is pretty obvious. Like, you'll know which one it is. But yeah, in that book they were talking about how he spent, like, Francis Bacon, which is another painter, his contemporary, and how they were friends from a young age. And they were talking about Lucian Freud's early paintings, and how one of them was, the subject was Francis Bacon, and how they pretty much spent time with each other for months because of that. You know, he had to sit in for this painting that he was doing. So yeah, you could be doing one piece for that long, whereas with comics, you know, you got to move quick. You got to move to the next panel, next page. And with that comes the opportunity to revisit all those stages. You know, that's what's cool about it. I get to go back to sketching, go back to like inking and experiencing that again. But as I mentioned, I enjoy all of them. Like, I enjoy comics, I enjoy painting. It's one of the reasons why this new project that I'm currently working on is a continuation. It's a painting. For those of you who are just tuning in for the very first time, it's a painting that I was working on a while back. This is years ago, and I just kind of forgot about it. And within these past few, I'm going to say months of like organizing my previous work and just kind of seeing, you know, what has developed over the years, I came across it and I was like, oh, that's right. I was supposed to do this. Like, I wanted to do a master study of, I hate using that word. I wanted to do a study of an amazing, skilled painter named Jacques-Louis David, French painter. And it is a painting of Socrates. It's called The Death of Socrates. It's something that, it's one of my favorite paintings. I absolutely love it. I love the story, the history to it, the idea behind it, everything. The painting itself is amazing. So yeah, I found it and I was like, oh, I should really finish it or start on it again. So I might not be doing it for too long. You know, I might actually try to finish it up on my own time because I do want to stream more work from imagination, more stuff that is personally mine as opposed to somebody else's or a study of somebody else's. So I might do this for like maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, because the week is already coming to an end. It's wild. Tomorrow's Thursday. So yeah. And you guys can check that out and see what it's about, where the progress is tomorrow. I'm going to be streaming figure drawing basics at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then the project stream at 9 p.m. And then Gil Elfgren, the special intro, is going to be this Friday. So make sure you tune back in if you can't make it tomorrow for Friday to see the rest of Norman Rockwell's work. Pretty sure I should be able to pretty much cover all of the rest of, I'm going to say, Norman Rockwell, and move on to the next influence of Gil Elfgren on Friday. I feel like there's like a hint of red here. Let's squeeze some white. Yeah, I thought so. There's like a little bit of red there. And I'm probably going to have to come back and redefine these little details, because right now they look a little wonky. They look like I'm really trying to avoid them, and it gives this like hard outline around them. So I might be doing inking sooner than I think. But going back to Lucian Freud, you know, it's a book that I found at a thrift store, and it was pretty cheap actually. Like I just picked it up and I was like, oh, what is this? And what I like about it is that it also comes with these stories, you know, these stories that you can't really find. I mean, you could find online, but it's just not the same. You know, it's, you got to piece things together. You got to combine it with the images and so on and so forth. So it's cool just to have that book and be able to read the story behind the paintings and observe the paintings. And it's just been my favorite thing to do now. Like I got myself that light that goes around the neck, and that transformed my reading completely. Like I just sit on my couch now and I get enough light to actually check out these books. And I'm really working on just staying away from social media as much, you know, really making it once in a while sort of thing, and just focusing more on like these books and reading and drawing more. Because the really addictive thing about it, especially if you have like a bunch of things that you're subscribed to, is that it's always gonna like bring more and more material. You know, kind of like appeals to like FOMO. You know, fear of missing out. Like you're just like, oh, what's next? And maybe there's something else that's new, and maybe there's like another thing that's cool that's around the corner, and it's just like. That's what like just doom scrolling kind of, I'm gonna say, is for me. It's just always thinking that there's something more and more around the corner. And that's what the appeal, I mean, that's how they get you, right? Like that's how they net you in. And before you know it, the free time that you have for yourself was just wasted on that. Like you didn't accomplish anything, you didn't learn anything. You know, you didn't develop anything. You didn't get better at anything. You just might have gotten some bit of information and some entertainment. And that's it. You know, has it actually improved the trajectory of your life and what you're going to do with it? Not really. You know, just made you happy for an hour. And that's pretty much it. So I'd rather sit and read interesting books. Learn some stuff about art, get to see some more beautiful art. Improve in drawing. That's what I'd rather do with my time. I don't want to get caught into this like never-ending scrolling of social media. And I've been keeping up with my my goal, which is to wake up early in the morning. Well, when I wake up in the morning, to look at books, like to look at John Buscema's work. Like I recently acquired, this is what I was talking about before. I acquired John Buscema's sketchbook. A beautiful collection, absolutely amazing, worth every penny. If you guys can get your hands on it, if you could buy it. If you're looking for a cool book to get inspired by, get yourself John Buscema's sketchbook. It's absolutely affordable. There's another great book. There's multiple actually. And there's another one that is John Buscema, the Michelangelo of comics. That's also a good one, but that one's a bit pricey. But if you can get your hands on it, it is incredible. So much work there, so much to read about as well. They really get you in on what goes on, what happened in history, and interviews, and the people that he talked to, and all sorts of stuff. It's a really cool book. I'm having a blast with it. I'm taking my time. I kind of don't want to finish it. You know, I don't want to like read it and then just be done with it. But that's never the case. This is something that happens to me frequently with books. I always pick it up later again to just like see some stuff and really study, especially if it's like dealing with comics or art or illustration. Like I pick them up over and over and over again, even after I read them. That's the cool thing about having those books too. They're always there to read. And with that said, everybody, and this is something I'm probably going to be doing after this, I am going to have to call it a night. It was a blast. I had a great time today, actually. I was thrilled that I was able to sneak in that special intro at the very beginning. So if you guys missed that out, you can always catch that after the stream. I'm going to put it up. I'm going to put up the link for the artist and the original artist as well. And that way you guys can get more familiar with it. So I'm excited for that as well. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. It was a pleasure. And I will see you tomorrow, same time and place, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here at the Art Lounge Alley. If you guys enjoy this content, please remember to hit the like and subscribe button. And I'll see you tomorrow.